Aquí. Okay. Now we invited the former chairs or president of the former conferences. In the first one that was in Sevilla has not yet arrived because today we have problems with trains. And the second we invited was the one which was in Florencia that had 4 chairs. That's why 4. And the latest one that was in Lisboa, but it was online, that is Patricia Pedrosa. So I think we can begin, and then Pablo, we are going to change the order because Nuri is not here yet. Se lo tengo que decir en español. No ha llegado Nuria todavía. Okay.
We would like to thank Eva and the entire organization for granting us this opportunity to introduce more the 3rd International Congress on Architecture and Gender organized at the University of Florence in Italy, which took place on January 2017, after 1 year of hard work, along with the publication of the digital proceedings, which were released during the pandemic in 2020. We would also like to take this opportunity to introduce ourselves briefly. We are Serafina Amoroso, architect and assistant professor at the Rey Juan Carlos University, previously an associate professor of architectural design at the School of Architecture in Florence, where more took place. Daphne Saldagna, member of the architectural studio Equalsare, based in Barcelona, specializing in feminist practices in urban spaces. Elena Cardona and Giulia Goula couldn't join us today because of work commitments. Maria Novas, architect and researcher, and Amelia Villaplana, architect and lecturer at the University of Alicante. We all met during the seminars held in Lisbon in 2015 on the theme Matrices, organized by Patricia Santos Pedrosa, who in turn aimed to continue the symposium Arquitectas, Redefine the Profession, that took place in Seville in 2014, organized by Nuri Alvarez Lombardero. Based on what we learned, thanks to these 2 events, it seemed important to us to continue the Congress in order to, on one hand, reinforce the work developed in previous editions, and on the other hand, attempt to open the debate in a transdisciplinary way to contributions that could enrich the discussion from other fields external to academia. This includes participatory practices and urban experiences carried out by and from public administrations, for example.
Thank you, Serafina, for the presentation. Thank you, Eva and Carlos, for the invitation of being here, and thank you, everybody, for being here with us, and welcome, and good afternoon. I very briefly wanted to introduce you a bit of more and why this word, why we decided to call the conference More and where this word comes from. So More, it's actually an acronym from the words merge, open, resignify, and expand. And this is actually these 4 actions is actually what we were trying to do with the conference. We were trying to broaden the disciplinary framework of architecture, introducing a feminist perspective. So for these reasons, we wanted to also challenge the traditional Congress, the format of the Congress, to open it, to expand it to a wider range of contributions. And for this, we worked on 2 levels. First, on the contents, on the concepts, and for this, we created 4 thematic axes. And also, we had some kind of intuition that the knowledge we wanted to approach was not just happening and in the academic context, but also elsewhere. So we tried to create different spaces, alternative spaces for debate. And for this, we first created a session called Cities Best Practices. And into this session, we invited people working in municipalities, in cities, public administrations from around the world that were actually working on projects transforming the urban sphere from a feminist perspective. We have representation of Vienna by Eva Keil, Santa Coloma de Gramenet was represented by Zaida Mushi and Nuri Parlon. Santiago de Compostela in Galicia was represented by our colleague Maria. We had also a participation of Sassari in Italy, Bogota in Colombia. Apart from this, we also created 2 workshops. One was more in the form of a participatory performance, a collaborative action. It was called Amore, and it took place at the School of Architecture. And it was a moment where everybody participating was invited to reflect on their personal relationships with their own cities. The other workshop happened in the public space in the cities of Figina and Incisa Valdarno. And it was called The Perception of Everyday Spaces from a Gender-Based Perspective. And we went to the streets and reflected together on the streets of the city. Coming back to the idea of the contents and the 4 thematic axes we created, these were called More Than Objects, More Than Cities, More Than Academia, and More Than Humans. And all of them were aimed to explore the boundaries of what was architecture, and we understood what was architecture in this moment and how these limits could be challenged by this feminist perspective. More Than Objects, in particular, was centered on the idea of deconstructing the concept of canonical buildings, of buildings as objects, actually. And was more focused on human relationships about buildings. More Than Humans was, in that moment, I think quite a pioneer topic for the conference. Now we are more used to this kind of approach, but it was quite interesting and important for us to try to use feminist perspectives to think about strategies to think on sustainability and on ecologies applied to architecture. I hand over now to Maria.
Yes, well, I will briefly explain the other 2 axes. Basically, the thematic axis, More Than Cities, highlighted how urban spaces reproduces and perpetuates gender biases. And this session included critical works and texts that fill some historical gaps, preserving and acknowledging the legacy of marginalized spatial designs and the legacy of women architects and urban planners in the 20th century. Additionally, this access included papers that emphasized the participatory, affective, and emotional dimensions of urban spaces, and consequently, urban practices that aim to deconstruct patriarchal dichotomies and categories. There was also a video set that was very interesting, was a bit experimental, and it delved into the intersections between constructed spaces and sexist stereotypes, which is also something interesting to analyze. And finally, the papers included in the last thematic axis, More Than Academia, reflected on the interdisciplinary feminist approaches to spatial education. This axis examined the boundaries that we create sometimes, examining feminist pedagogical practices while questioning the disciplinary boundaries between the educational and the learning processes that we create sometimes in the field of architecture. And this took place through practices that hybridize writing, construction, drawing, fieldwork, and more. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of the keynote speakers, Liza Fior and Lisa Jorelli, and of course thank them once again for the participation in the Congress. Both represented two different ways, two different approaches that align with the Congress objectives. On one hand, critical contributions from professional practice. You know that Liza Fior, she's she's an architect and one of the co-founders of MAF Architecture and Art based in London. And on the other hand, from the academic production. Since Lisa Jorelli, she's an environmental psychologist, and she has a long career at Aalto University in Finland. And finally, from the organizing committee, we wanted to extend, of the third International Congress on Architecture and Gender, we would like to extend our gratitude not only to the keynote speakers, but also to the entire scientific committee. Eva was also part of the scientific committee, the institution, and of course, the participants who made more possible.
So in the proceedings, you can find all these in the form of over 50 international contributions from countries in Europe as well as in Latin and North America, among others. The content was created in a time prior to the recent intensification of feminist movement that exploded throughout the year 2017. The Congress took place in January of this year. Therefore, this publication is the result of 3 years of work after the Congress, which the editors have undertaken with extremely limited resources, but with a lot of care and honesty. Now this publication is freely available online for all those who may find it useful. We invite you to download it, read it, and make use of it. And we will be talking more about this publication during the book event on Thursday, so see you there. Many thanks, muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
Well, good afternoon, buenas tardes, boa tarde. My brain is a mess between Spanish, Portuguese, and English, so I'll do my best. And I'm very creative in all of the three of them, so it will be a challenge. I should speak after Nuri Lombardero, because she is the moment zero of all of this. We will accomplish 1 decade next year, so it's interesting. I was thinking about this. History is nice. We should think about what to do with this event next year. But first, let's survive to this, Eva. So I brought 4 images and a couple of paragraphs because I was hoping that Nuria will present the origin. So if you don't understand, it's not my fault, okay? After Nuria will arrive And you see, I'm not as messed up as as you think I am. So let's try. Well, I will tell you a small and quick story. 2014, I drove to Sevilla from Lisboa with Ileana Sousa Santos, another Portuguese architect and friend. She was part of the scientific committee of Nuri Lombardero's Arquitectas, the first Congress. And my objective was really simple, to present my ongoing work on Portuguese women architects. But I was lucky, and I met Núria, I met Marta Thorn, I met Lia Antunes, I met a lot of wonderful colleagues, friends, researchers, activists, and professionals that somehow engage in this genealogy together. No, sorry, okay. In the middle of the trip, I had this crazy idea. Could we organize a second event in Lisboa? Núria was generous and said yes to this proposal. So the second ICAG matrices was born between Alentejo and Andalusia in the spring of 2014. Soon, Maria João Matos joined us in this adventure. For me, for us, in Portugal, emerging to these topics, this moment was fundamental to build our networks, national and internationally, to learn and to feel a little bit less alone, less lost. We can see how women in space research and praxis grew in Portugal almost a decade later with dissertations, articles, research projects, encyclopedia entries, etc., etc. Our solitude went smaller day after day. Two years ago, the 5th edition of ECAG Action consolidated this intense and challenging path. Together, Lia Antunes, Ileana Sousa Santos, Helena Soto, myself and others, we had to deal with a substantial new challenge, COVID and confinement. 7 months after we started the organization, we had to decide on the online way. It was very frustrating. The idea of physical distance was overwhelming. Being together was, and is, I think, the fundamental motor of these events. But it was also amazing because action allowed us to be together in isolation and hard times. And there we are, together again. Let's go on building this feminist tree. Let's get stronger together. I wish us all a great time, and last but not least, Eva, Carlos, and all the team members, thank you for your great and hard work. So let's start and wait that Núria arrive and explain, the origin of the rainbow. And she's here, yeah. Yeah, you don't know, but we prepare all of these, okay? Welcome, Núria.
Soy hablo directamente.
Ya te conoces.
Sorry, I got lost in the Cabify. So I don't know if there are slides or if not, I just talk.
Vamos por atrás.
Well, I can start while the slides are coming. So, well, I think they welcomed you already, so I don't say it again. First, I want to thank you to the University of Valencia for inviting me and all of us, and to Eva and Carlos for organizing this, because it's amazing the work you're doing and how you managed to organize this again. I am here, but we are here representing a network of people who is much larger than us. And I want to just introduce what we have done in the past since the first event that happened in 2014. So as you can see here, this is the constellation of people, the network that was constructed through these years, and even larger. I don't have all the pictures here, but you can imagine there's kind of 1,000 people or more in the world related to these congresses. And the first conference I organized in Seville, where some of the people here were there, started in 2014, and there was a very small group of scholars and practitioners. We didn't fill the whole lecture hall. It was just like maybe 20 people at that day. It was for 2 days, and we were questioning hegemonic positions in architecture that were not able to address those challenges posed by the encounter of architecture and gender studies. At that moment, different global events were putting a special emphasis on awareness of the women's rights situation worldwide. We are thinking about 2014. We are witnessing a growing interest in gender studies in generations, new generations, who were asking for equal rights and a multiplicity of visions in all fields of knowledge, and so in architecture and related disciplines. As part of this movement, a renewed critical reflection considering gender and more particularly women's studies was claimed for a new, more plural conception of architecture. Yeah. So this was the first Congress. As part of this, in this sense, there have been different approaches to understanding of the social dimension of design practice, the educational practices, the history and theory of architecture, and the theory of the architect itself. A scope full of tensions and contradictions, uncertainties, possibilities, and discussions that had difficulties to find a place to be unfolded, contrasted, and shared. This was the inception of this set of conferences and its modus operandi, as you will see these days, an arena for sharing reflections, investigations, actions, and practices to reactivate the discourse, and a place for meeting and debating and extending a network of questioners with new perspectives on the field. As we consider architecture operates at the intersection of various elements depending on contingencies and context at a particular place and time, all these conferences have had to deal with a wide set of power and production relations and face a complex set of cultural, political, economic factors, as well as systems of representation, objects, forms, and meanings. Therefore, they have been an open platform with diverse entry points without prejudice, and this can be seen, we will see in this day's conference. And thanks for keeping it on to all of you and the next, who hopefully will continue with other congresses. I think all of you already presented the different conferences that were organized in different places. The first one I organized was more focused, as you can see here, very few people in the room, was focused on and it was called Arquitectas, Redefining the Practice. And at that point, the focus was on the profession. Despite the new advances in architecture, the profession continues to operate in a depoliticized practice where inequality is still present. I think hopefully all agree that here. A growing hegemony of neoliberal approaches in the production of architecture has made large corporate office preponderant over small architectural studios, and so this has continued the antiquated structures internal in the workspace where paternalistic treatment, stereotypes, and alienation of workers prevail. These forms of labor organization obviate more and more the needs of architects and marginalize those who don't follow the prototype of the super productive worker. And women architects are the majority within this group, as their biological condition related to reproductivity does not allow them to be able to continue with this labor prototype. They are the ones who struggle and the most to have a place in the architectural panorama. In this degradation of the profession, women architects place a direct criticism to the forms of labor in contemporary architecture, and this is the focus of was the focus of this conference. And for this reason, it was important to reveal any inequality situation by gender in the profession, because it not only implies a criticism of the discriminatory social and cultural constructions over women architects, but also favors the worker in general, advocating for more compatibility between production and reproduction. And this was the purpose of the conference, and the call of papers, it was responded by many, like, I think it was 14 articles were selected. There were a series of questions that were addressed in that conferences, and some of the people who were there or were involved in that and later are in this network that I was mentioning before. This was the inception of it. And, okay, sorry, this, and finally it was published in a book that was, it got a prize in the Biennale in 2014, so it was a long time ago, but still you can buy it in some bookshops here in Spain. So thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this.
Thank you for your speech, for coming here. I was suffering for Nuri. And now we ask Susana Torre to be here today, but he had some problems, she couldn't come. And then we tried to record some words from her, and finally we recorded, but the images were terrible. So we have put some photos from when she was here twice at university, and we will see the video.
Por unos pocos minutos esta conferencia que espero posteriormente poder seguir a través de podcast. En 1975, hace ya un rato, cuando establecimos el archivo de las mujeres en la arquitectura en Nueva York, lo hicimos con el objetivo de realizar una exposición para visibilizar el trabajo de las mujeres arquitectas. Después de largos debates, decidimos limitarnos a los Estados Unidos, pero aún así no sabíamos cuántas arquitectas habían ni dónde trabajaban. Era la época donde la gente en Nueva York ignoraba que hubiese mujeres arquitectas, o, si lo sospechaban, se asumía que eran muy pocas. 50 años, como saben, no disponíamos de Internet ni de ninguna de las posibilidades actuales de acceder a información, lo que requería, por ejemplo, en el caso de realizar un doctorado, mudarse a la ciudad donde estaba la biblioteca universitaria que nos permitiera desarrollar una investigación. Decidimos crear un archivo para coleccionar y organizar la información que laboriosamente estábamos recolectando a través de contactos personales y asociaciones de arquitectos. Demoramos 2 años hasta llegar a un punto donde, aun cuando sabíamos que la información estaba incompleta, teníamos bastantes ejemplos para poder determinar qué tipo de trabajo realizaban las mujeres en los estudios de arquitectura y también identificar las escasísimas prácticas individuales. Durante ese tiempo realizamos la investigación histórica, ya que nos parecía muy importante entender la posición de las mujeres en las prácticas de arquitectura desde el comienzo de esta como profesión en los Estados Unidos. Y también identificar influencias muy importantes en el entorno construido realizado por mujeres que no habían estudiado arquitectura, como es el caso de Harriet Beecher Stowe, mucho más influyente que Frank Lloyd Wright, su contemporáneo. Este trabajo, que llevó 2 años, hoy podría haber sido realizado posiblemente en menos de 1 mes. Debe decirse que en nuestro caso hubiese sido imposible realizar el proyecto de una exposición y un libro sobre las mujeres en la arquitectura sin haber previamente organizado nuestras investigaciones en la forma de un archivo. No pretendíamos coleccionar objetos físicos, ya que no teníamos lugar para guardarlos y todavía no sabíamos qué tipo de exposición íbamos a realizar. Es por esta razón que al iniciar un archivo es fundamental decidir cuál es su propósito. El International Archive of Women in Architecture, del IAWA, por ejemplo, tiene desde panfletos hasta colecciones de correspondencia de varios años de una práctica, también dibujos y maquetas. Además, pretende ser internacional. Cuando participé más activamente en la junta directiva de este archivo, consultamos a un archivista profesional que insistió con mucha vehemencia que era muy importante coleccionar todo. Bueno, tuve la ocasión de comprobar esto en una visita a una de las bibliotecas de la Universidad de Cambridge, donde se exhibía una libretilla de Isaac Newton con su lista de la compra. Lo que nos permitía saber, por ejemplo, que le gustaba mucho el queso Stilton y también cuál era el precio, cuánto había pagado. A la distancia del tiempo, todos estos detalles que parecen tan ínfimos pueden de alguna manera dar una idea mucho más fehaciente de la realidad de esa situación. Imagino que entre las preguntas que se debatirán en la conferencia estarán aquellas que comparen las virtudes y desventajas de archivos digitales con aquellos que coleccionan objetos físicos, como dibujos de proyectos que permitan seguir la evolución de un diseño. Todavía queda mucho, mucho por hacer en la historia de las mujeres en la arquitectura, incluyendo estudios comparativos y en profundidad de obras de arquitectas individuales. Para mí es obvio que es todavía muy, muy importante crear archivos e incrementar los ya existentes con objetos físicos, además de información digital. Eso es todo por hoy. Muchas gracias.
We really suffered to get the recording. You know, yesterday night we were working on that, so apologies for the mistakes. So now I think that we can take out the table and continue with the lecture and the introduction by Marina Sender and the lecture by Paula Sender. Ustedes dos, sí.